Well, last week in our crossover to Germany, we touched briefly on the American military base there. That's because we're dealing with our own here. Well, political correspondent with our partner DW, Thomas Sparrow, has been doing some more digging and has more on the subject. Thomas, help us with the details that you have at the moment. How does the military base in Germany operate? How does it work?
Well, Gifty, the first thing that we have to bear in mind when we're talking about this base, and this base is called Ramstein, is that it is part of a much wider cooperation between the US and Germany on a wide range of fronts. That cooperation goes back for a long time, and Ramstein is one of the most important military components of that cooperation. In fact, if you look at some of the details, you will see that it's the largest military base of the United States on foreign soil. They have around 22,000 military personnel there, and if you include the family members of those 22,000, you get up to 54,000 people just in or around that base near the German city of Kaiserslautern. And if you look at statistics more in general about active duty personnel from the US in other countries, you will see that Germany is in the second position behind Japan. In fact, from statistics 2016, there are 34,000 US military personnel in Germany. So that just explains the magnitude of the cooperation between Germany and the US and the importance of Ramstein as a military base. It is often described as a sort of hub for US troops that go elsewhere, but it must also be said that this base has been involved in a lot of controversy and also to a certain extent shrouded in secrecy, because not everyone knows exactly what happens in that base.
Speaking of not everybody knowing what exactly happens in that base, do we know the sort of agreement, what's on paper between the USA and the German government?
Well, there's very little confirmed information about that, but if you ask the German government, I've been looking at some of the press conferences in the past where they've addressed this issue. What the German government says is that they expect from the US and from other countries as well that may have troops on German soil, they have to respect German law, they have to respect NATO rules as well. In other words, it's often described as a contract, as an authorization that Germany gives the United States to carry out operations from that base, but they cannot do anything that would go against German law. If you look at different media outlets, they're saying that it is not like an embassy of a country in another country, which is seen as an extraterritorial place. It is definitely a place here in Germany that has to respect German law, and the German government certainly starts from the point where they believe that the other countries involved would respect that. But again, there are certain actions, certain elements that have been reported in different media outlets that have had a big question mark on whether that is certainly the case all the time in the base of Ramstein.
This is definitely a major sort of cooperation, and I'm wondering, how has Germany over the years been able to manage the American presence there, and does it come with any political implications at all?
Well, there has been a lot of controversy regarding two issues in particular in recent years. One, reports that Ramstein played a very important role in the US drone war, in particular regarding data transmission and so on. And the second, that Ramstein could have been used by the United States as a hub to send weapons to Syria. Two very controversial elements from a German standpoint, because Germany, as you might know, is a country that certainly does not like to get involved in wars abroad. That's something that's very embedded in Germany's political culture. So it's also there's been a lot of controversy regarding that, even protests regarding that. And if you look again at the reaction, most of the reaction from German politicians, especially in the German government, has been that they try and make sure that the base and that the operations that take place in the base and in other parts are always respecting German law. However, there are media outlets that have stressed that although German government might know certain elements, they also are not necessarily interested in knowing absolutely everything, because if they do not know absolutely everything, then they're not obliged to act. But that, again, those are only reports that have been published. If you ask the German government, they normally have the answer that I have given you.
Very interesting. And it looks like the secrecy is all over the place, both in Ghana and Germany. But over here in Ghana, what we're being told is that it's going to help our security agencies and it will shore up our security capacity. I'm wondering, is it the same for Germany? Does it come with any security implications, pros and cons?
Well, those who are in favor of the base and those who are in favor of an increased military cooperation between the United States and Germany would certainly point to that aspect that you mentioned. They would say that having this U.S. presence in Germany certainly helps not only the U.S. and Germany, but some of the other allies as well in dealing with international threats like terrorism, for example. There's another pro of having such a base, which has been described widely here in Germany, and that's the economic benefits. Just imagine having all those American people near the city of Kaiserslautern in that base, what that means for jobs, for the housing market, for economic development. So there are those who say that closing such a base would be very bad from an economic standpoint for the cities near or around that base. Those are certainly two pros for having that base. On the other hand, there are certainly cons as well presented by those, for example, who have protested on German streets, who want the base to be closed. And the biggest con, if you want, the biggest element against that base is precisely what we've been describing. The fact that not everything is absolutely clear what happens in that base, and that there should certainly be much more clarity, and that by having that base and by the US conducting operations from there in other countries, as those reports have mentioned, Germany is also in a way participating in those efforts. And again, Germany is a country that has tried to avoid getting involved in many wars, and for the politicians who defend this idea, having that base is certainly a problematic issue.
Right. And finally, and very briefly, tell us what else is happening in Germany that we should know, Thomas.
Well, last weekend was extremely busy here. Gifty, you might have seen the news that a van drove into a busy street in the city of Münster in western Germany. 2 people were killed there. The driver also died, and there are around 20 people injured. There has been a lot of debate as to what were the motives, and what authorities have said so far is that there does not seem to be any link with political motives or religious motives or terrorist motives, that it most likely has to do with the mental health situation of this person. At the same time, there were reports here in Berlin at the weekend during the half marathon here in Berlin that pointed to a possible attack, an attack that was definitely prevented by authorities. So those were 2 elements that were very important in recent days that have been debated since, in particular because the security situation in the country remains a very important issue politically.
Thomas, thank you so much for that update. Thomas Sparrow is political correspondent with our partners DW, bringing us up to speed all the way from Germany. So, still on this matter of the U.S. military base and how it operates in Germany. Of course, here in Ghana, we're told that it is not a military base. But the one thing that you can take away from both discussions and from what happens in both places is there's certainly an amount of secrecy that goes on in all of these. You're still watching The Pulse with me, Gifty Andoapia, and talking of this cooperation, Latif was covering it when he was beaten by the police. So the hashtag continues, justice for Latif. Keep watching.